This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Tuesday evening. It's October 1st, and coming up on today's show, we're going to get the Knicks perspective on this deal from Jonathan Macri. John runs the Knicks Film School Podcast, and the two of us thought that his listeners might want to hear from me and that mine might want to hear from him. So we thought we'd do a little crossover deal, which is really my way of saying I went on his show and we're going to snag that conversation and play it over here as well. But before we get to that, which is like a 70-minute conversation on the trade, I thought I'd give a few takeaways from the first day of Wolves training camp, which was today. Still a little awkward at practice, being as the trade still hasn't been finalized, which means Finch, when he did his media, again, couldn't really talk about anything. But I did think one of his answers when he was asked about Ant today was interesting. Here's Finch.
Ant said in an interview yesterday that he's just been playing more off ball, trying to do more movement off the ball, things he picked up from playing with Steph. What does that look like right now?
It looks good. It looks real good. There's definitely more activity off the ball, screening. Steph's a great screener off the ball because the way people guard him, leave him. Just finding things, thinking two passes ahead in the flow of the game. Like, those are next level stuff for our entire offense. So it's great to see him doing that. I think it's going to be important, for sure. Like, we need to have that. We need him to have that dimension to his game.
So two parts of that are interesting to me. One, he is just going to have to function off ball effectively when he shares the floor with Julius Randle. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Randle is going to be a primary handler and creator often, not more than Ant will be. Obviously, that would be a bad thing, but Randle is going to have the ball in his hands a good amount. That's his game. In ways, it's like similar to D'Angelo Russell. D'Lo's best offense when he was here was played through himself and kind of on his timeline. And when Ant played off ball next to D'Lo, Ant was not active. Those were the possessions where we'd see him just kind of relax in the corner, and it would have been better on those teams a few years ago with D'Lo if Ant would have been able to activate himself off ball, when the ball was in D'Lo's hands, and in this case, when the ball's in Randle's hands or Conley's hands or anyone's hands. Ant is going to be more of an offensive weapon if he treats himself like a weapon off ball, and that's undeniably a great thing for him to add to his game. And if he thinks it's cool because Steph does it, like, great. It'll just be a good thing if it happens, and if Finch is encouraged by it, then I think it's even more likely to happen and be a win in that way. The other interesting part about that to me is it's like yet another double down by Finch of being like, I am not going to take the Luka or James Harden mold or path for Ant. I mean, Finch has been, we've talked about this for years, right? Like, Finch has been pretty steadfast in not believing that that's the best path forward for Ant offensively. He wants Ant to be a part of the offensive flow. He doesn't want Ant to be the offense, right? So again, I'm not surprised or won't be surprised when Finch wants to utilize Ant off ball more in ways that maybe Luka or James Harden aren't used. But there was part of me, going into this season, like a trade ago, but where just given how little point guard depth that this team had, I thought maybe we would see a little bit more of that, point Ant sort of idea, the more heliocentric look. But I think Finch is holding steady to what his belief is on that of keeping Ant activated. And again, the same thing of being part of the offensive flow, not being the offense himself. And I think with Randle in the mix, it's going to be a win for Ant to, be able to be a weapon around Julius Randle, not just only a weapon when Ant has the ball himself. I thought another interesting answer today, just going to kind of rip through a couple of these that I thought were worthwhile to mention. I thought another interesting answer came from Nickeil Alexander-Walker when I asked him where he wants to take a step this season.
Where do you want to take a step this year individually? I think I want to take a lot of pressure off Mike. Just playmaking as a whole, coming off the bench, playmaking, kind of bringing that poise that he's brought, taking a lot of pages from his book, just learning how to like control a team, control the pace of the game. I think he's got a great feel for that. Credit that to like his abilities mixed in with who he is as a person, his work. And you don't get to year 19 just off of, just hanging around, and like he's definitely got some accomplishments to his resume. And so for me, it's just like that's something I look up to. Like, how can I get there?
Like as a point guard, like you're saying, very specific point guard.
As a player, as a man, a lot of respect for him. I see him like an older brother to me. So just taking those things, and that's that step I would like to take, is becoming a full, complete playmaker. I know that I'm going to be there defensively. That's what I do, and I've accepted that's who I am, but adding to that.
The more I've thought about this trade from a Wolves perspective, the more I've come to think like if somebody is going to be most hurt by this trade, it would be, or their role would be most hurt. I think it makes sense that it would be Nickeil, just because I think there's a lot of overlap in the games of Alexander Walker and Donte DiVincenzo. So to me, I think this is encouraging because it almost seems like Alexander Walker needs to take a step as a playmaker if he wants to be able to kind of maintain that relatively big role that he had off the bench last season, like 20 plus minutes a night. I mean, there's just going to be fewer minutes on the wing available this season than there was a year ago. But at the same time, there's going to be more minutes available at the one, or like the pseudo one next to Ant. And I think if Nickeil can kind of take a step forward as an offensive controller, creator, then I think we could see a lot of the Ant and Nickeil in the backcourt together, where it's like the kind of sharing point, like one brings it up one time, one's bringing it up the other time. We obviously saw that some last year. If you look at like cleaning the glass, they logged those as the minutes where Ant was the point guard, like the minutes where it was just Nickeil and Ant, and then there's no Conley out there, there's no Monte Morris, there's no Jordan McLaughlin, there's no Kyle Anderson. When they were the two guards out there, that was 14% of Alexander Walker's total minutes, total possessions that he played last season. I think if Nickeil wants to, again, be a 20-minute a night guy, he's going to have to play more of his minutes alongside Ant as kind of a point guard or pseudo point guard with them. In the way that Nickeil does that would be by improving his playmaking. So I think that's spot on right there. The last clip, or I guess these are clips, aren't actually from practice today. It's from Josh Minott at media day, media availability on Monday. But I just think, given how much hype Minott has received kind of from Finch and from Tim Conley about how good of a summer he's had, I was just interested to hear from Minott at his media availability. And yeah, I'll just play that first clip. It was like our first time talking to Josh Minott in a while, and he talked about his confidence.
Confident back in front of my jump shot. I feel like anytime the ball leaves my hands from beyond the arc, it's going in. And also, I feel like I just got smarter. I feel like just understanding what works, what doesn't. So just like making the right reads, stuff like that. Just simplifying my game, not worrying about doing too much. Just doing what they expect of me.
With that confidence in your jumper, does that come with like a change in mechanics, routine, practice? Where's that confidence coming from?
So it's kind of like a combination of all, everything you just mentioned, but I'd say like most importantly is my like mentality. Like I don't really care about missing anymore. Like it's not like something I fear. I used to like fear like, oh, if I miss this shot, then this domino effect happens, and I'm gonna like hurt the team or anything like that. Now it's just like, man, every time I shoot the ball, it's either two things, and I'm either gonna make it or miss it. So I don't really care too much, and when I stop caring, it goes in.
Now, I still don't know if Minott is going to get the opportunity to show off that jumper. If he was the 11th man before the trade happened, he's now the 12th man, and I don't know. That's kind of the same place in the pecking order that he was in last season, and he obviously didn't play much last season. I will say though, like it does kind of feel like it's we're getting close to it's now or never time. With Minot, he did sign a 4-year contract out of the draft, but this is year 3. And if there isn't really an opportunity to play this season, then he will be on an expiring contract a year from now, which I don't know. It's a funny sort of proposition to even be a young drafted prospect, but to be drafted by a good team. And even if you do progress and you do have good summers, that opportunity isn't always there, as if the team's just good and it's deep and it's got a lot of pieces. I asked Minot about that at Media Day, just kind of what it's been, the idea of being drafted by a good team versus a bad team, and kind of how that impacts your minutes as a prospect.
Ask you about the team you're drafted by has been very successful. They've won a lot of games since you've been here, which is maybe if you had been drafted by a team that wasn't winning as much, you would have got more playing time opportunity. How have you thought about like those two different paths, and what has been the value, maybe if you haven't had the minutes here, but of being in a quote unquote winning environment?
Yeah, it's a conversation I've had a couple times. I mean, I kind of seen it with just players around the league, especially in my draft class, in terms of going to I guess the opposite end of the winning spectrum, and seeing how that works. And honestly, I mean, I'm happy to be where my feet are. I mean, opportunity is something I feel like everybody in this room knows. It's been a little scarce here, just with the culture we have and everything. And I don't know, I kind of just embraced the work, embraced the G League. I guess did my time, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, I'd say overall, I mean, it's just been a learning experience that I probably wouldn't find on that other team that wasn't winning as much. Yes, I might be hooping and going out and playing, but it's like I don't really know the value of what I'd be learning. So I mean, we just did something really special last year with the conference finals, and I got to be a part of that winning culture and see what it took. And it's I feel like that's more valuable than going 20 and 62 and still I guess hooping.
That's an interesting one, right? Like it'll be interesting to see if Minot gets an opportunity, what he's able to do with that opportunity. I mean, in ways, obviously, this is an example of something that of a player that this really worked for. But Naz Reid similarly had to kind of wait and had this sort of belief in himself and maybe growing skill set, but the opportunity didn't really come until year 3 in a major way for Naz, and then he kind of took it and ran with it. Again, I don't know what the opportunity is going to look like for Josh Minot this season, but it does seem physically and mentally like he is in the best place he's been to run with that opportunity if it does present itself. And I don't know. We've just been hearing a lot of Josh Minot hype, and I figured while we can't really talk about Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, we get a little Josh Minot hype talk in here before maybe that falls a little bit lower down the importance pecking order. Again, this episode is going to be all or a lot about that trade with Jonathan Macri at the Knicks Film School. But would like to let you know first that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, and I've got 2 prize picks I'd like to let you know about for Thursday night's football game. In all seriousness, I've really been having a lot of fun with Prize Picks for the NFL season. I don't really do it, for the NBA, but when I'm watching a Thursday night football game or Sunday or whatever, I'll put together a little $5 lineup. And, particularly if on Thursday night football, if I don't have any players playing on my fantasy team, it's kind of a way to sort of duplicate that. So the 2 I picked for Thursday night football, it's Bucks Falcons. I got Bucky Irving accumulating less than 54.5 total rushing plus receiving yards. And I have Bijan Robinson to not score a touchdown. And again, how it works is you submit those 2 right there. If you did $5 on that, if that hits, you win $15, 3-1 on your money. Good news is if you don't have a Prize Picks account and you want to create one, you can use the promo code Dane. And when you create an account, use the promo code Dane, and do put a lineup together for $5, PrizePicks will immediately credit you with 50 extra bonus dollars in your account. So PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app, promo code Dane if you would like to create a daily fantasy lineup for Thursday Night Football. And today's show is also brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company. I know some of you are thinking about getting those windows redone before winter or making a bathroom renovation happen. Obviously, that's not something every single one of you have to do, but if you do have home improvement needs, I would love it if you checked out Your Home Improvement Company. You can do that at yourhomeimprovementco.com, or you can just call them at 866-777-YHIC. Right now, they do have a buy two windows, get two windows free deal going, and they are offering 30% off bathroom remodels. If you want to do a simple tub to shower conversion or full-on bathroom remodel, they can take care of you. Again, it's Your Home Improvement Company. All their work is done by certified professionals, and you can get your project done with zero down, zero interest, and zero payments until 2026. Again, Your Home Improvement Company, 866-777-YHIC or yourhomeimprovementco.com. Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better.
Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, one of the preeminent podcasting voices in the NBA. He has been covering the league for quite some time, not only the Minnesota Timberwolves, but you could hear him talk about the league at large on his exceptional podcast, the Dane Moore NBA Podcast. And we are pleased to have on the show for the first time a fellow Blue Wireman. That's not a word. Dane Moore, hello, sir.
What's up, guys? So you're saying now we're related. We're connected through Karl-Anthony Towns, man. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Did you ever think it would happen? Let's just go right for it. Did you ever think it would happen? Like,
yeah, no, I did. I mean, not on Friday night.
No.
I was about a bottle of wine deep when the news broke. But yeah, I mean, it was, I would say, like 12 months ago. The word was, all right, one of Nas, Cat, or Rudy aren't going to be there in a year for all the reasons we're talking about, from the financial flexibility and second apron and all that stuff that just makes that true. Like it really looked like the only reasonable path forward was that one of the three of them was going to be gone in a year, as happens. But then the playoffs happened, and it was kind of because all three of those dudes were so effective in conjunction with each other, particularly in that Denver series against Jokic, and the way that they were able to, I mean, Rudy gets cooked by Jokic. I mean, as everybody does, but Rudy can't guard Jokic one-on-one. And how you have to guard Jokic, I think everybody is in agreement with this now, is you got to have a big body on him, and you kind of got to have somebody else that are helping at the rim playing off of Gordon, right? And a Cat was great at that, man, in the Denver series, and so was Nas, right? Like they both like held their own, just trying to be in Jokic's way, and then relied on Rudy to be help at the rim, and it worked. And so that kind of changed things in my view, and I think in many people's mind, of like, all right, Western Conference Finals. I mean, there was some issues like fit and spacing and all that sort of stuff, but like it seemed like they put a lot of that behind them, and it was like, all right, let's run it back again. Let's see what this looks like. We know the financial bill is going to need to be paid eventually, but it seemed like once we got through like summer league, I thought like maybe something could have happened then, but then I was kind of, like, all right, Cat's back.
Yeah.
Like, let's do it again. Let's see where this season goes. And then Friday night happened.
I think it's funny, talk about being tied at the hip, because yes, we are brothers in Cat now, but we are also in a way brothers in Julius and Dante as well, who, I'm sure we'll talk about both those guys a little bit, but like we were kind of in a similar situation over here, because the Julius extension, not deadline, the Julius extension window opened on August 3rd. And I think everybody was like anticipating that date, even in light of the very consistent reports from the beat here in New York that like they were not going to, like, that was not on the forefront, mostly from our guy Ian Begley. And then that date kind of came and went, and it didn't get accompanied by any rumors of any trades or anything like that. So we were all kind of sitting around being like, all right, well, I guess they're comfortable being uncomfortable going into next summer, you know, with this thing hanging out there.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
like the Lauri Markkanen thing, but like sad, right? You know, it's like Lauri Markkanen was like the same thing, but you're like, all right, that's either going to get taken care of, or like it's going to get taken care of. Was that like August 6th? Like
it was August, it was August 6th, yeah.
Same timing, and then Randall is just like, all right, you know, or just here, like
it was ominous, right? it was definitely ominous, but at the same time, nobody thought that the clock was ticking to this degree. And the only conclusion that I could draw with all of this, especially in light of what you just said, is that this was less, and there's been reporting on this, including from you. This was less about the Wolves reaching a point where they're like, all right, we got to get rid of this guy because of the financial reasons and this and that. It was more the Knicks were like, we need to, like, it's going to cost this price to get him. All right, I guess we got to pay up. Is that how you view it?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, and like you said, this has been reported out there a bunch, but that's everything I was hearing on Friday night was like they put Dante in, and that changed the calculus on it. There was, I mean, the Knicks have been knocking on that door for a long time, right? And it just like the Wolves are good, so it was like it was never going. They were not going to make a cap trade that they felt made them worse in the immediate, right? Like there's been other offers of like, you know, 2 first-round picks and like salary dump, right, to come back to Wolves. And the Wolves are like, we're not going to do that. Why would we do that? That doesn't make any sense. We're going to get worse. Sure, we make up a couple draft picks that we lost in the, you know, the Gobert trade, but that was never even really on the table. And the Knicks offers were all, I mean, like a little bit better than like quickly, maybe back as an option before, like Robinson. But the Dante one, I mean, 3 years, 36.
Yep.
That's nice.
Pretty good.
Know? That's pretty good. And like so fitting of what the Wolves are doing, like defensively. I think of him a lot. Like they're going to miss Kyle Anderson a good amount as like a, you know, a defensive connector, you know, an additional point of attack defender. And I think Dante fills in a lot of that spot that they were internally concerned about. I think that was that moved the needle along with the, you know, the Detroit pick that with the, you know, descending protections over time. But like, that's not a bad asset either. Like,
no, I've been very bullish. I've been very bullish on that pick since they got it, with the rationale like this is clearly an organization. I can't believe we're talking about Detroit. That they're gonna keep putting their foot to, you know, the pedal to the metal, even if it's not maybe the wisest thing to do. And at some point, like that pick, it feels like it's going to convey as the 10th or 11th pick in the draft. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I think it's at least a 50% proposition. It does. And I mean, it'll suck if it's a second, but like, again, Dante, like clearly a positive asset return. Obviously that pick, whatever it ends up being worth, is a positive thing. And then Randall, like it's expiring, you know, like
maybe.
Yeah. But I mean, what do you think about that? I'm curious. Have you guys been playing this game a lot longer? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No. Like, so I listened to your pod, most of your pod today, but I listened to all of your pod reacting to the trade, and I forget which. I think one of you floated the idea of, I don't know if I don't want to put words in either of your mouth, but like, are we 100% sure Julius Randle is going to like be on the team the whole year? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I am looking at it again from the Wolves' perspective. If this was in at least some significant part about being able to afford Naz and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, well, then what would Julius opting in do to that plan?
Well, you could still like, let's just say Julius does opt in, right? And
let's say he opts in, sure.
Then like, what would need to happen to retain Naz Reid is Rudy Gobert also has a $46 million player option for that season, so he would need to decline that player option and sign an extension maybe for, like 36 a year or 40 a year,
Dwayne Wade did that back in the day, right? He declined.
Yeah, and a lot of guys.
Yeah.
And that might make sense for Rudy too, right? Like, I mean, you're going to need to pay him still, but Rudy will be 33 then, lock him up for himself of like some security of 35+ million a year or whatever for a few more years. I think that's a feasible proposition. I don't know how Rudy feels about that, but that doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. So I think even if Julius opts in and they have some space below the second apron, particularly with Rudy doing that, where I think you could get Nas back. You could get Nas and Nikhil back if Julius opts out. That's completely there. I just think, man, I don't think $30 million is that much anymore.
It's like it's not at all. Which is why we've had these conversations. I don't mean it's like we've been talking about this all summer because. Right. Imagine you're Julius Randle. You're a 2-time All-NBA player. You're a 3-time All-Star. And you're like $30 million. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Jared Allen just got $30 million. Like, all due respect to Jalen Suggs in Orlando, wonderful young player. They're talking about Jalen Suggs maybe getting an extension upwards of $30 million a year. And Julius is probably looking around and be like, what? Did I miss something here?
There's no way in hell Julius is sitting around in his head right now thinking he's opting into that player option, right?
I completely agree with you, which is what makes your situation, I think, fascinating now, and which is what made our situation on our end so fascinating because of the uncertainty and we've seen it play out. I know you're obviously familiar with the Brendan Ingram situation. Well, if this is his price tag, what does that do for his value if you are looking around the league and trying to get something real back for him? Right. And I think that's how we end up here with the Knicks doing what they, in part, obviously they're in love with Cat. Like I talked to Fred Katz about this of The Athletic. They were in love with Cat. That's why they made the trade. But this Julius piece factoring in, I think is just so interesting.
Well, and there's an apples and oranges element to what the Knicks financial situation is to what the Wolves financial situation is surrounding Cat. I mean, part of the reason why I always thought the Knicks thing had legs to it, even without having heard anything, I was like, man, what better team out there to take on a $50 million player who's like maybe worth it than the team who has no expensive players? Yeah. Like the Knicks had nobody who made $30 million last year. Like just in that sort of like vacuum, it's like and the Knicks are good. I mean, there's other teams who don't have any $30 million players who are bad. You're like, oh, whatever. But like the Knicks
trying to win.
Yeah, like that always made some sense. And that's why I think it makes some sense from their perspective. Now, in many ways, just if you delete the names, you look at the salaries on there, like it looks like a Charlotte team. What the distribution does, like the distribution of wealth of the players.
Yeah, you're right.
And to that, and like what team can take on the $50 million player? And I know we have to do it. Like the Knicks have a lot of those players, but they don't have one really expensive player. I know OG's deal. But
even that, if he stays healthy,
right? Like, it's I don't know, it makes sense to me.
I want to let's go back to Cat because you started off talking about a lot of the basketball with Cat, which is I'm happy you did because I feel like I've been listening to as much analysis of this trade as possible, and where I've kind of come out is the talk, not from Minnesota's side, but like when people are discussing this in the context of the Timberwolves, I feel like I hear a lot about karl-Anthony Towns, the person. And how you are going to, and you talked about this so eloquently. I said it the other day. I'll say it again now. If anybody has not listened to the Dane Moore podcast, the show right after the Towns trade, regardless of what you think about the trade, listen for the first 15 minutes, because the way you guys spoke about him and what he has meant to you individually and what he has meant to the city of Minnesota is just like, you could tell. You can't fake that. Mm-hmm. But less, not nothing, but less about the basketball part of it for Cat. And I want to get back to why I suspect why that is, because I want to hear your opinion. From the Knicks side of it, it is more about the basketball. But for a lot of Knicks fans, they cannot separate the basketball part of Cat from what they perceive to be the Cat, the person. And I don't mean that as a compliment. And because of this perception of what he has gotten painted as, over the last few years, and John Krasinski, who I obviously know, I thought he worded it very well today in his eloquent story for The Athletic, and about how you guys, the Minnesota fans, have started to push back against some of those narratives over the last few years. Like, wait a minute, this has gone too far. So I threw a lot out, Eddie, but I want your just general take, and then we'll dig in a little bit.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a fascinating thing. Like, I'm from Minnesota. I have a bunch of friends I grew up playing basketball with here, and they can't stand Cat. Like, they can't, just watching it. It's maddening. It's maddening to them, and we'll get in. The basketball stuff. I think most people see some of that too. Like you're gonna pull your hair out, like watching some of the Cat stuff. You are. You are. I mean, it's like he doesn't. He's not going to deliver consistently on what you think he needs to deliver on from an X's and O's standpoint. You and Tibbs both going to be.
No, he didn't have much hair. I at least have some hair.
Right. But what I always say to my friends is I get it. It drives me crazy too when he flails down the lane with his arms all over the place. He passes up a decently open three to go in there and get an offensive foul, all that stuff. I get it. I get what people are saying, but I guess simply just because I have a little bit of, access to something that my friends don't have, of being in the locker room and being around and getting around Karl. It's the one thing I can say, man, is that dude's a good dude. And that's not the case of a lot, a lot of players in the league, and a lot of players as a teammate, Karl is kind and considerate, and all those guys. I mean, listen to what Rudy Gobert said yesterday about bringing him in. Look, everything you've seen Ant ever say, Karl is kind and good and makes, people feel comfortable around him. I think he has a big, desire to be liked. And that might be an understatement. And it it colors a lot of the way he acts and is, and the way he's extremely aware of the way he is perceived. And that bothers him. And it bothers him the way that he's perceived. And I think people make fun of the voice changing and stuff like that. Those are all his internal mechanisms of trying to be perceived as someone that is more likable than he feels like he is being liked, if that makes sense.
That's absolutely makes sense.
And it's a complicated thing. And quite, if I'm being honest, I think that would be a hard thing as a coach to need to just navigate from a personality standpoint there too. And I think that's an important distinction to be made between what John and I were saying, is that dude's been a great guy to us. That doesn't mean he's going to come in and be this personality that's easy and wonderful in the context of the Knicks locker room on the floor for the Knicks. There's complications to Karl in that way too.
It's a good thing Tibbs cares about nothing more than how players are feeling and their internal emotions, and whether they just need a shoulder to. Yeah, that's Tibbs.
Karl does though, man. That's the thing. It's Tibbs has got it. Tibbs has got to operate differently than he did before with Karl. He does. This will not work if Tibbs does the same thing. I was there, man.
It's interesting because, again, perception versus reality. Johnny Bryant, who's the associate head coach, and he left recently to go join, I think it's Cleveland
College?
staff.
Yeah.
And the, again, perception is that he was brought in by World Wide West. Yeah, Cavs, GMSC is confirming that he was brought in to be the other half of Tibbs that Tibbs does not have. And he is gone now. And so that part will be interesting. Not that there are not other people on the staff. I mean, Mo Cheeks just came in, and different players have different relationships with different guys, but that's going to be a very interesting dynamic. I have to ask you though, in addition to that's part of it. How much do you think that bleeds into, I will say I'll just come out and ask, do you think he's soft? And do you think that label is unfair?
I think he's again, constantly trying to fight that narrative that he is soft, and in the process sometimes does soft appearing things, and the way that he carries himself. I mean, and honestly, my answer to that might just have been Yes. But
Okay.
the playoffs happened. Then the playoffs happened. And Karl was not soft in the playoffs, man.
Didn't look like it to me.
He was. I mean, it took on a less sexy role, the ball less, the minutes less, but guarded Durant in the first round, took on that Jokic matchup we were talking about in the second round, playing through an injury that was not back to, 100%. And played well until the Dallas series, really well. So like, I don't know. I think people say soft and they're just saying they don't like him. Like they don't like his vibe. Like that's what that's always, come off to me. And if that's, if that's what your opinion is, but like, I don't think that's what soft is. I think that's people making judgments from afar about who and how someone is, right? Karl showed for the first time in his career in the past 2 seasons of playing winning basketball. Yeah. And so like, I don't, it's at a minimum an outdated notion, but sometimes he is going to flail around and is going to appear soft. It is, it's both. It's both. And it's confusing, man. Like I'm fascinated for you to experience it because it's unlike any other player, at least any other player I've ever covered. It's just unique.
You're about to get a unique player on your hands in Julius Randle, but again, I'll let you enjoy some of that self-discovery soon, because it's funny just listening to you talk about Towns. Maybe not everything you're saying, but a lot of the things you would swear that you were talking about Julius. Where I mean, to pull your hair out stuff, where you'll have games where you want to have a really good time on a lonely Tuesday night. Go back and watch any footage from the first 6 games of last season. When I tell you that people were ready to build the rocket ship to get him to Mars, but then you turn around and you see what he did against you guys. 57 points, like it was nothing. Like it was nothing. And that's the kind of up and down you get, which gets me back to Kat and the next thing I want to ask about, because I feel like when a star player or a guy who is perceived to be a future superstar player gets drafted into the league, there was a certain amount of time allotted for that player to see if he can raise his ceiling to achieve those goals. And then after a certain amount of time, it's either you got there, you're one of those guys, you unequivocally did not get there, and you just you failed, or you're somewhere in between. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about it in the context of Towns today, and I think I would say he is in that in-between group. I'm curious of your opinion on that, number one. Number two, I wonder if for those guys it becomes not purely, but a lot about situation. And hearing you again talk about how maybe it wasn't the best fit on offense over the last couple of years after he moved from center to power forward, I'm wondering if maybe there is still some bloom left on the rose by this move to New York, potentially putting him in a better basketball situation and getting back to what maybe he could be.
I've always been of the mind that Cat's best story probably looks like Anthony Davis's in leaving New Orleans and going somewhere else and a better environment that firmly has him unambiguously not as the top option. Because that was a weird dance we've been playing for the last couple of years here. He was not the number one option on this team, but you had to kind of treat him like it because he's the dude who was the first overall pick 9 years. He's been here forever. It's his team. He's persevered all Tibbs and Jimmy and all that sort of stuff. Like there was, and it was just like, it felt forced. It felt forced all the time. And I thought when that really started happening, a couple of years, that first Rudy year, like I think Karl's best story is going to happen. The best version of his story is going to happen somewhere else. And in a situation that has a hierarchy, a pecking order on the team that has him clearly not as number one, which check the Knicks do. Yep. I mean, it's going to be Brunson's team. But it also my story would have required an organization and a coach that would know how to lead Karl into that. And I do not think, having covered Tibbs for 2.5 years here, I don't think that's Tibbs, and I don't know, is that Johnny Bryant? I mean, he's had it isn't now because he's gone, but
Johnny Bryant now, yeah.
Karl has had those, like, that was one of the messed up sort of things, like with Tibbs, is like Cat's guy was a prominent assistant in the league named Vince LaGarza, who was maybe you've heard that name before. He's kind of hopped around. I think he's in Utah now. Yeah, he's been in a couple different places, but like he was Cat's guy. He was his Johnny Bryant. He's like a big 6'10" dude who would like worked with Cat, like his whole upbringing, in the league. And Tibbs comes in like year one, and LaGarza's still there. And then I believe I have this right. Then he just fires like the whole staff, and Tibbs brings in, Dice and Greer and all the guys. And like, without really like consulting Cat up, about that, or Cat was very upset about that. He needs those things. I think to get the best version of Cat, he needs to be in the number 2 spot in a situation where he's not the guy anymore, but he also needs to be empowered to be the number 2 guy. And a lot of that is about off the floor, empowering him to make him feel comfortable and make him feel wanted and make him feel liked and just good about what he's doing. And I don't know about that part.
I'm endlessly fascinated by Tibbs. I'm a Tibbs guy. I'll just say right out front. But like the notion that this is his strong suit, like clearly, it is not. He's a smart man.
Rosas knows Cat too from Like I don't know how that connection is anymore now. I mean, there's actually, I mean, Tibbs and Rosas, those are both former presidents of basketball operations for the Wolves, who both work for the Knicks now, who are both there with Cat. Again, I don't know the status of those relationships, but at least there's some familiarity there.
I wonder what the self-awareness is on Tibbs' behalf, because as you know better than anyone, the things that he believes to his dying day. And he obviously likes to make it all about basketball. And if it's not has nothing to do with basketball, then it doesn't matter to him. Well, where does the self-awareness on the personal level fit into that? And is Karl going to need that to specifically come from Tibbs, as opposed to maybe somewhere else on the staff or somewhere else within the organization? I think we have yet to, obviously, remains to be seen.
And to be fair, like, he definitely needed that when Tibbs was here and he was 22, 23 years old. Karl's 28 now. Like, he's gotten older and just definitely more mature than he was back then. Maybe Karl needs less of that. But I do think if you want to get the best version of Cat, it is about convincing him to play the way that you need him to play. And he needs that through like love.
Well, let's talk about on the court, because, you talked again at the start of the show about, you were saying how great he defended Jokic in the role that he had. But then right after that, you're like, well, and so did Naz Reid.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about Cat shooting. And then right in the next breath, we could talk about Naz Reid shooting. And like, you go down the list, and again, just like the way that I have been perceiving the conversation about this from Minnesota's end, and he had Bobby Marks on ESPN today go out and say, Bobby, I love Bobby, he's been on the show, go out and say, I think Minnesota got better, which is not a crazy statement on a number of levels, but the fact that it seems to be so comfortable to put that out there, it doesn't feel like you guys feel like you're going to miss all that much on the basketball side. So tell me I'm wrong, or tell me I'm misperceiving that, because that's what I'm getting from what I'm hearing.
No, I think that is fair. I think it's been this question we to some extent always have, of like, how big is the delta of what Cat provides in terms of team winning, right? The numbers are undeniable.
Since Edwards, specifically, or has that just
it's been always.
Okay.
It's been always like, who's the guy? Who is the player that the individual player teammate that Karl-Anthony Towns has elevated most in his career? Is it Andrew Wiggins? No, that didn't really happen. Didn't really happen with Jimmy.
No.
It didn't. Like Ant and Cat like had a tenuous on court chemistry in terms of just like they never really found a great 2-man game together. Like weirdly, I think the player that Cat helped most in his career of a teammate of elevated them was Rudy Gobert. And I really do. I think like offensively, Rudy too. I mean, he would get downhill and he'd find Rudy on lobs better than anybody else on the team, including Rudy in the offense, which you know how that works. Like, and I think Cat did get that of like, okay, getting Cat to like get Rudy to do a little bit more on offense. He's going to give you a little bit more on the defensive side of the floor. But there's always been some of that like Ewing theory to Cat, where it's like, well, how big is what is the difference? I mean, last season, Karl missed like the last 20 games of the year. And I was at the very first game of that where it's like, all right, Karl's out, and it's like he's maybe out into the playoffs, probably going to miss the first round or whatever. And it very much had a, like, people were like, okay, that season's going to kind of like deflate, and they're not going to win a playoff series anymore because Karl got hurt. And we had some of this Ewing theory going. And what happened is you probably remember this game. It was in Indiana, and it was the game where Anthony Edwards hit his head on the rim, blocking the shot at the buzzer. And what happened that night was Ant was like, fuck it. I am taking over. Like I'm the guy. We are still going to the playoffs. We are still like, nothing changes. We got enough here because Naz is good. Naz is 80% or maybe more of what Karl is. And they didn't miss Karl that much in the last 20 games of the season. Now they benefited from, which got them into the playoffs. They ended up a game out of the 1 seed, even after losing Cat. And then they really used Cat in the playoffs. But my glass half full to this trade is thinking about the end of last season when it was Rudy, Naz, Jaden, Ant, and Mike as the starting 5. And that team looked just about as good as the team I was watching the first 60 games of the season. And so I don't know if that's necessarily, it's somewhat of an indictment of Cat, but it's also somewhat of a unique circumstance of Naz being there and Ant ready to take on more that he like never totally felt comfortable with, given that this was Karl's team and Karl was the guy and Karl's the vet and all that. Like that's all gone now. And now Ant can do his thing and Naz can do his thing. And I don't know. If Julius doesn't sink it, I think they will be just as good, if not better than they were last season.
I don't think it's an accident that I think your guys' championship odds went up like slightly, right, after the trade, and the Knicks did as well. Again, I have to point this out because like last year, Julius goes down with a very visible injury. It was Jaime Jaquez got under him, and that was that. That turned out to be OG Anunoby's last game for a while as well, although that was more a long, drawn-out process. There are definitely a subset of Knicks fans, I don't want to guesstimate a number as to what percentage it is, that think that if it was just Julius that went down and OG Anunoby was healthy for the remainder of the year and everybody else stayed healthy, which, of course, by the end, nobody was healthy, they would have been in as good or better shape. Now, I have my doubts about that because Jalen Brunson can only support a 57 usage rate for so long, and he was pretty spent by the end. So, but neither here nor there. That's why, for me, sitting here and being like, well, Cat's he's not in that superstar, like he failed to get to that level, is because of what you just said, and because you could take him off of a team. And at the very least, there's discussion about, oh, did we really get worse? If you're a superstar, that isn't the case. Why I am bullish on the trade, despite the fact that it may seem like I'm not, is I think that there is still something to unlock in him where, as you talk about, he's not the guy, but enough can be exploited from enough can be made of his skill set. Because I feel like, is there a world, or do you think there's a world where if you tap into everything that he could do, because there's nothing the man can't do on offense, at least. Defense is a different story, but there's nothing the man can't do on offense. I wonder if there isn't still a world where you could tap into all of that. And I think you could argue this is the greatest challenge of Jalen Brunson's career. And to bring that out of Cat, because he's never played with anybody that's talented. And now they're gifting him. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do want to talk about the defensive part.
Oh, we'll get to it before I get to it.
Because I think that's a huge part of this, and I think about it from the Knicks perspective. But Karl can do anything offensively. I agree. The way he distributes it has not always been in line. Like the Tibbs days, and I would be interested, and I assume that they like probably get back to this. Like the Tibbs days, Cat led the league in like points per possession and post up situations and at high volume. I mean, he was a dominant back to the basket center. And that was that like Jimmy team and stuff. Like he was pretty much getting single coverage down there, which I think in the right lineup configurations with the Knicks, that it'll be hard to like really double Cat down there. But so he's a back to the basket guy. Like, of course, yeah, he can shoot, but he's really good. Volume wasn't really there. The volume's never really been that high, except for 1 year, is the first Rosas year where they just played 5 out and he got convinced to bomb. It was like Cat shot like 9 a game, and it was like he's a quarterback of the offense at the top of the floor, and he really let it rip. But that is 1 year, I would say, in Karl's career where I would say he was a high volume 3-point shooter. The rest of the time was the back to the basket stuff. He started getting doubled in the post, and that killed his post-up game. Completely frazzled him. His turnovers spiked. He started anticipating the double, and it just got messy. And so teams went away from putting him in, or the Wolves went away. Finch went away from putting him on the block because he couldn't handle the doubles. And then what happened was, because he wasn't going down to the block, teams started guarding him with 4s. Like your Nicholas Batums, your Kyle Andersons, your guys like that, who are still like big, but like, it's like, all right, if you're not going to put me on the block, like we're going to guard you with a 4. And now you're not like pump fake and going past Steven Adams for a dunk, right? Because I'm Batum and I can move my feet with you. So that really like started neutering a lot of Cat's other stuff that he could do on the perimeter. And it also was like, but Karl wanted to do that. He still wanted to like go to the basket, and he wanted to go downhill, but now he's being guarded by OG Anunoby, those sort of guys. He's just not, it's not the same. It's not the same potency. And it's like, you're feeling more resistance. I always say like Karl is a floor spacer, but he weirdly takes up so much space, because even if he's above the break there, like, and he's looking to go downhill, like he's going to get down the hill, but he's going to wind his way there, like, and probably run into some gap help around him and get stripped or throw an elbow or some of that stuff. Like he's been like blowing in the wind, trying to figure out what is my like go-to offensive thing.
Who am I?
Yeah. And part of it is, I get it being kind of confusing, because, I'm kind of ripping on all those things that he couldn't do, or they got worse. They just got worse. They didn't get bad. You know what I'm saying? And so it wasn't like, there's very few things they like just cut off from him to do, but he's really, to me, offensively lost a clear offensive identity into like, he's this player. And everyone thinks, I'm sure all the Knicks fans think like, oh, he's just he's like Porzingis. You just space him up from 3 and he's just gunning. He's not that player, but he hasn't been for the last couple of years in Minnesota. He does not shoot a high volume of 3s. That would be like the one thing I would get through to people, is like, he should take more. I've always thought he should get to a step back game more often. Like that volume should be higher, but I've given up on that. Because it's been years. It's made too much sense and hasn't happened. He wants to get downhill and he wants to play like Giannis. That's how he wants to play. And that is not, in my opinion, that is probably not the best version of himself. And I think it's certainly not the best version of himself on the Knicks, because you know who that is? I think that's just Julius Randle,
Yeah. Well, it's Julius. I mean, look, Julius was at his best when he was going downhill. And to his credit, over the years, the stuff that you just talked about that Karl would do that was not so great, where he would, go into turnovers and everything. Like, we've had bouts of that with Randall over the years. The difference is that teams obviously knew what Julius wanted to do. They knew where he wanted to operate. And one, they were able to guard him in a way that prevented him from getting into those comfort zones, because he doesn't have the jump shot, obviously, that Towns has.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of it, and this is not Julius's fault, the Knicks never had the spacing to make that as feasible of an option as it would have been, which is why the talk the entire summer was, we're finally going to get some small ball. We're finally getting opportunities for Julius to operate as the 5, which I said on a podcast recently, like, him and Naz Reid, I think, are going to be awesome together, like supporting your guys like backup units. Like, we'll see if it goes that way. But back to Cat, like, it really does sound like Tibbs, in more ways than one, is going to have his work cut out for him. And again, to a lesser extent, Jalen Brunson, because I do think, Brunson is the guy who has the ball in his hands a lot. Like, I thought he made Julius a little bit better. I don't know that those guys ever had the best chemistry. I'm hopeful. But as you say, I think it's going to be an uphill battle.
But the thing is like, it's possible. Like, I have always believed, like, Karl-Anthony Towns is a few small adjustments away from making this work. Like, because we said, like, the game's there. The part we were most concerned about, we can talk about now, is like, the defense has elevated some. It is not
so
what it was.
That.
It was not. That. Yeah, but I just, like, there is a way that I think, with good coaching and, like, careful coaching, that you can find an offense that gets Karl to work to like maximize himself. And again, I go back to the Anthony Davis thing of like with the Lakers. Like, I think that is out there for him. You're just going to need to be intentional about finding it. Defensively, I think Cat is fascinating. Because
I'll take that word. I'll take that word over some other words.
Because, like, I mean, I'm giving him his credit for the playoffs. That is the reason, like, that they were able to do the cat on Jokic and Rudy and the spy roll thing is why they were able to beat the Nuggets. And that is no small feat. But the arc of Karl defensively is wild to me. I haven't covered him his whole career, but most of his career I've been here on the beat. And what has happened, there's been so many executives and coaches who have been here in that time. It's not that long. It's like 8 years, but it's like 7 Pobos and 5 coaches. Maybe it's the other way around, a ton. And so what always happens is, it's new coaches come in, new assistant GM people and whatever, you end up having some of these conversations with them. And I'm telling you, to a man, every single person I've ever talked to, it has taken 1 year, and they have gone from being like, we're going to use Karl in a drop, to we absolutely cannot use Karl in a drop. That needs to be gone. Everyone, man, every single coach, because it's a decently big body. It like seems like something he should be able to do. Yeah. And his, and he has big feet, and he's not like super laterally nimble, but it is not the best thing for him. He's like Jokic. He is best up. And if he's the 5 blitzing in coverage, the year before they got Rudy Gobert was the first year, for my money, that Karl-Anthony Towns is a clearly positive defensive player. And that's the Pat Bev team. That's the Jared Vanderbilt. Like,
that was the Minnesota series, right?
Memphis series, yeah.
Sorry, that's
Minnesota was in that series too.
Thank you.
But they Finch was open about it. He's like, yeah, we're like a pitcher that has only a fastball. All we can do is blitz and coverage, right? They called it their high wall. And Karl would fly up to get the ball out of whatever, Trae Young's hands, and then they rotate on the backside, Vanderbilt or McDaniels, or whatever, like we see Denver do. A lot of different teams do that. And that's Karl's best defense to this day. Not like he played some drop a little bit better last year. Obviously, he had to do it a lot less because when he was playing the 5, it was offense against, backup groups. So you're not playing against super dynamic pick and roll players. But I think certainly Karl's best defensive coverage is playing up. It's the one he said he's most comfortable in. He said it's his preference time and again. He said that. And I know that is not Tom Thibodeau's preference for how he wants to play. It is the staple of every Tibbs team ever.
Yep.
is drop coverage and rim protection reliant on, on the center. And that flamed out terribly. Even the year the Wolves were good with Jimmy, that the Wolves were terrible. I think they were 26th defensively that season.
I will ask you briefly, how do you perceive Cat as a switch guy?
I don't think you want to do that. I mean, I think you can, like, you play up with the intention of getting like the ball out of his hands and then, have him work, man. Like, get up, show, recover back. But I don't think you want Cat to be switched then onto an island with a player who's going to be fast. And what he does when he gets in the switches, he plays off. He tries to defend with length and then guys who can hit mid-range shots cook him. But like, that's not that bad. Not a lot of guys can do that, right? It's Durant kind of did that during that series, but that's all Phoenix had going there. I think Cat's got to play drop, and he's got to do it, more effectively than he ever has in his career. I think that's a huge part of this, and I do not think that that's his best, the best defensive position to put him in.
The only reason I ask about switching is because that is the one thing that we did get at a media day, because obviously, as you know, couldn't talk about the trade. Is Tibbs said they'll switch more, and OG actually talked about that a little bit more. And it's funny. There's another guy talked about the impact that Brunson's going to need to have on Cat. I think how Tibbs deploys OG Anunoby is going to impact what is required of Karl defensively, because obviously OG Anunoby's not Rudy Gobert, but the more they are comfortable with him, guarding centers one-on-one, which we'll see, you can do that against some teams. It's all fascinating to me, and it's exciting.
That was really interesting. Like, if you can have OG be the guy who's guarding the screener,
well, yes,
then so you're gonna have to get some like pre-switch stuff going there. Like, Karl's processing speed is not. He's never been able to do that, really.
Okay.
Like, they messed around with that from time to time, and it just got like messy, But again, that doesn't mean they shouldn't try to do that. I'm just saying Karl does not have experience doing that and doing that well. And because of that, again, what they've landed on is up in coverage, then try to get back. Don't hold the switch.
Well, it's going to be interesting. And the one takeaway I have from this conversation is that, Tom Thibodeau has a lot of power in this organization. His voice carries a lot of weight in this organization. Obviously, he just got a 3-year extension this summer on top of I think he had a year left. But I don't think it's a overstatement to say this is going to be his biggest coaching year in New York, because for as much as it's easy to sit here and say, well, if this doesn't go well, then obviously Towns is going to get blamed. Well, if it doesn't go well, then you can't turn around and trade Towns because of the money. You could fire the coach. It's always easy to fire the coach. So, but then look, Tibbs wanted this. So I have to think he knows what he's in for, and we'll see how it works out. Any last? I keep you here all night, but any last thoughts from you? Anything you're wondering about on our end?
Yeah. We're gonna play this audio on my show too, so some of so some of my listeners can kind of get a Knicks perspective. I think the one thing we haven't talked about here is DiVincenzo, and I like.
Let me grab a box.
You're just like, oh, he's great, he's good, you're a good contract. It's like, where do you think the Wolves are gonna feel him, and do you agree with how much of a win it was to get DiVincenzo in the trade?
Well, there's a reason they didn't want to give him up until the very end, and it's not just the Nova thing. I don't think that for 1 second. I mean, I made the argument in my newsletter the other day that I think $11 million for a player, or $12 million, whatever, for a player that caliber is valuable to any team that has designs of winning and that it has a big payroll. I think you could argue that it is as important for Minnesota as any team in the league. And because New York's, again, the apples to oranges, our finances are not quite at the level that you guys are at in terms of what's coming down the pike.
Mhm.
So I think there's the value there. In terms of on the court, it's funny you were talking about before, you know, I forget what context, but you mentioned in kind of like the off-ball defense and someone maybe who was there had played. Once Dante got to move off the ball this season, and he was on the ball when OG was out, and then OG came back and he was more used in that role, and obviously Josh Hart had his turns there as well. As like an off-ball defender, you're going to absolutely fall in love with him. He's so smart about jumping into passing lanes and igniting fast breaks. But the thing is, just like the shot, man, it finally hit, and like the signs were always there since the day he got drafted. You could see the numbers, like whatever it was, 283 threes. You saw the percentage, the whole thing. When you watch him night in, night out, like there are some, like for instance, Evan Fournier, what was it, 2 years I think before, set the Knicks franchise record for made threes. I don't off the top of my head, I don't know what the number was, what the final number was. I don't know what the final percentage was, but they were good. Like it was a lot of threes, and it was at a pretty good clip. And yet, there's not a Knicks fan alive who was going to sit and be like, oh, yeah, I had absolutely zero qualms and no doubt in my mind that when Evan Fournier stepped foot on the court, it was like, even if, like, yeah, there might have been an off night, but because of that shooting, it was going to be a positive difference for us. It is 180 degrees in the other direction with DiVincenzo. Does he have off nights? Sure, he has off nights. Every shooter has off nights. But there was never or very rarely, I can't even think of one off the top of my head, where you watched him and you're like, I wish this guy wasn't out there tonight. Because even if he does have an off shooting night, he will find other ways to make up for it. And he never does. He doesn't take anything off the table. The biggest thing that I was kind of waiting for, I was kind of wondering about was like, if we get into a series against Boston, is that team going to be able to exploit his size sharing the court with Jalen Brunson? And is that going to limit the amount of time that those two guys could play together? And I'd be lying if I didn't wonder to myself whether that was at least like 1%, 2%, 3% part of their calculus here. Like, hey, we're going to have to get past the Celtics. Well, if we have to get past the Celtics, like how are we really going to be able to play two guards of that size together? But that's neither here nor there. You're going to love him. You're absolutely going to love him.
I think the off-ball part is really interesting because I think the Wolves have one of the best on-ball defenders in the league in Jaden McDaniels. And you maybe thought I was about to go say Ant right there.
No, I mean, well, but one guy has a bigger load to carry, obviously. So,
Jaden is significantly more consistent with his defense than Ant is. But I do think Ant is terrible off ball. And
okay,
Ant
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it's bad. Yeah, watch it. You just sit down and I'm sure you're gonna go watch some. You're gonna go watch some cat defensive stuff.
I am gonna watch it.
Yeah. Keep an eye on Ant when he's starting guarding the guy in the corner. See if he sticks with that guy.
Okay.
But Ant is like if you're saying DiVincenzo is more of an off-ball than on-ball guy, Ant is the inverse of that. So that's a good fit. Jaden's one of the best, I think, on-ball defenders in the league. But I also think what's nice is DiVincenzo, like Alexander Walker, can do both. Like he can do both. And I think there's real value and importance with this team, not just this season, but going forward in expanding what Jaden McDaniels can be on both sides of the ball, but particularly offensively. He's just been like a go guard Luka guy, and like maybe you're going to take 4 shots in the game. I think what they want to get to is like, all right, Jaden, you don't have to do every single possession on Luka. We'll use you as a off ball situationally. We'll put Nikhil, Ant, Dante now on there. I think that will help Jaden have more energy for offense, and I think it will help keep Jaden out of foul trouble. And I think that's really big if part of the vision of where this team goes over the next 2-3 years is the like Ant, Jaden, and Nas thing together. Like Jaden needs to become like an 18 a game guy, a higher. I mean, he's like a 14 usage right now. Like that is going to turn up. And I think to effectively turn that up, you need more guys who are defensive minded. And I think Dante being able to provide that
defense.
because the Wolves have like Dillingham, like that's gonna be a weak defender to add to the rotation.
And just the other thing
yeah.
I'll say, because you're talking about McDaniels, Andrew, who's producing this episode, has made fun of me in the past because let's just say I think highly of Jaden McDaniels. I'm very, very high on his potential long term. I feel like it was
That dude's a dog, man.
He's my type of player. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Dante is the sort of guy, like everybody always talks about. Oh yeah, if you're a young team or you're up and coming team, you want to grow. Like get shooters. Like shooters will just make you better. I feel like that's truer of some guys than others. And when Dante's out there, it's the combination of his shooting and his smarts, and he knows how to leverage himself so well. He's always moving. And transition, like you have to pay attention. Like, so that's the thing.
Finch is gonna love that, man. Finch,
yeah.
The constant movement in the half court and an intention to get out in transition.
Yep,
like that is literally what the Wolves need.
That's
to add to their offensive cocktail.
So then the only
not
question,
what Karl's good at are those two things.
Right? What?
I mean, Karl's super stagnant in the half court setting, and he's just big, so he's not a big, transition player. I think
he's the trail guy.
He's a trail guy. Yeah. He's good at that. But it's just, I think like this team already has, Rudy Gobert. They got another trail guy in Naz Reid or Julius or whatever. I'm optimistic. Like the reality of the situation is Dante DiVincenzo shot more threes than Karl last year and shot him at the same clip.
Yep.
Like that. And it's a little bit different, positionally. Like, okay, now your five can like space the floor, but from the Wolves standpoint, Karl wasn't the five. Rudy was always going to be in the dunker, and functionally, in many ways, like Dante's going to be the spacer, just like Karl was the spacer, like above the break. And I think that will, in a weird way, like I think DiVincenzo will be able to fill in a lot of whatever's lost there.
My big, I mean, from a general NBA fan standpoint, I'm going to be looking to see how often, if at all, we'll see. It is Dante and Ant in the backcourt to close games next year. Because if you could get away with that, which I'm sure you guys talk about Ant's playmaking growth a ton because it has grown a ton. I wonder if it gets to that level where they're comfortable, with that. Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I just think, it's really important for Mike to play at the end of games because Ant doesn't have like late game offense playmaking down yet. And Finch has said that, like that's a point of weakness.
So we're not there yet.
No, I don't think so. But I'm kind of thinking like, could you go Conley, Edwards, DiVincenzo, and then maybe even McDaniels goes to the four. Like I think Dante could still close games while Conley also, while Conley also does.
Okay. Well,
I do think a big thing though, like a lot of people point to like Cat's struggles in the Dallas series for a reason, or just like the team running out of gas. Mike Conley is awesome for this team, a great piece, but he could not function in coverage against the Kyrie and Luka and roll game.
That's why I bring it up because when you get to
that's
those levels,
the tug and the push and pull. Like they need Mike out there for late game offense, and they would prefer to take Mike off the floor for late game defense. Against that type of team. But if you're playing, I don't know, like you're playing the Pistons, like that, who cares? But we are talking about the playoffs. I think the good thing is like Mike will be comfortable seeding minutes, like he is 37 and like that won't be that. I don't think that'll be like some huge collision if they do need to go to that at times. And Mike Conley just can't play 76 games again, closing them, starting them, whatever. Like I think DiVincenzo gives them another like live body that allows them to, to keep Mike Conley fresh for the playoffs because Conley is important to this team.
Well, you're gonna love DiVincenzo. I'm very.
What about give me Julius, and Gobert thoughts? Sorry, that cut you off.
Look, Julius takes him. He takes him. Like he fires away. And he has operated like I could show you some numbers over the years with Julius, with and Mitch, who is I love Mitch. to everybody out there listening, I love Mr. Robinson, but he is arguably the least skilled, big time center in the league, like a guy who has started a lot of games. And Julius, in those alignments, even with RJ Barrett at times, when RJ was not exactly lighting the world on fire, you would look at the offensive numbers for those for those lineups, and they were really, 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 really good. Like Julius is a lot smarter than he gets credit for. And I tell you one thing that he started to do over the last few years, much to my chagrin, he often tried to like force passes into Mitch, and they were good passes, but Mitch is not the guy that can handle those, and so it didn't often end well, which was a point of frustration. More on Julius, it wasn't fair, but like, why you keep trying to force this? Like these are not going well. Like, so that's maybe a possibility. I think you'll like Julius. I mean, I'm more curious on his end how, I don't say how empowered he is, but like, he was the first guy here. He was here before Brunson, and that reputation carried over. And like, yeah, like Brunson became the best player on the team. He became the most important player on the team. But around here, and I wonder if even inside the team, it was more like, all right, we got 2 all-stars. Like it's like 1 and 2, and maybe not that much separation. That doesn't carry over with a trade, So like, it was kind of just expected. Like, okay, well, whether Julius is having a good game or Julius is not having a good game, he's going to close the game. Now, some of that's on Tibbs, because Tibbs, didn't want to ruffle feathers, I think, and he wanted to keep his guy, and that's the other thing. Julius, like you talk about Cat needing to be managed. Julius needed to be managed to a certain extent. And so what happens the first time, like he's not in the closing lineup? And if that becomes like a semi-regular occurrence, like what is that going to mean? And those are not questions that we ever had to answer here, because he was just like, he was Julius. Obviously, he was going to close games. To say nothing of obviously starting games.
Yeah, I think at least to the starting point, I think the Wolves are in like a good position to empower him at the beginning. Where like, I think there's like a perception out there that, Naz Reid needed to be able to start. I don't think that's what it is. Naz Reid needed to be able to get to 30 minutes. And not like that didn't, like, he was a 22 a night guy, like when Karl would play. So there's a way, I think, to give Julius.
How many is Rudy playing?
32, 30, 4. Like, but I think Naz is going to play the 3. I think you'll get Rudy, Julius, Naz minutes. I think Naz is more of a 3 than a 5.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. I
mean, he's a 4. He's a 4, but like, I mean, Naz can hoop, man. Like he's just, and he's got the speed and he's got all that. And honestly, he's like lost 40 pounds since he's in the league. Like he is like substantially thinner than Julius Randle, just like in build. I think
that's notable then.
It's the classic situation where like a guy came out of the draft process and they're like, this is a center. And we just like decided they're a center, and Naz weighed 40 more pounds when he entered the league than he did not. Like, he's never really had a center game. It's funny when we've talked to him, he goes, I remember his like rookie year asking him about it. He goes, this is the first team I've ever played on that I've ever played center before in the NBA for the Timberwolves. Like he didn't play that way. It was like he's like a combo kind of forward is how he grew up playing. So I think you can give Julius the starting job. You don't have to maybe close with Julius all the time or the same political things that you had with Karl. So that gives you a little bit more wiggle room there. And then I think you can play all 3 of Rudy, Naz, and Julius together. So I think you can get Naz to 30 minutes a game while keeping Julius happy as a starter.
It's funny because we can end here because I know I've kept you over, but like there was a ton of excitement obviously about this season before this trade on the Knicks, the fan on the end of the average Knicks fan. I'm not sure if that level of excitement has gone up or down since the trade, if I'm being frank, but putting aside the center issue, which obviously they have now tried to solve with this trade, the one thing that people were worried about, that concerned about at the very least, was like, wait a minute, do we have too many guys? Because you have all the starters and, Randall, McCall, OG, Jalen, like all those guys, Tibbs gonna like. I don't tell you, Tibbs likes to play his guys, and so okay, 34 minutes, 35 minutes, whatever it is. Well, Josh Hart just got done with a playoff run where he played 48 minutes in, I think, 4 consecutive games. It's some ridiculous thing. And then Dante, I think I looked it up last season. I think if you started the clock at maybe it was sometime in like early February and like ran it to the end of the season, like Dante, I don't know that he led the league in minutes, but he was like, it was pretty damn close. Like he was going out there playing high 30s just every night. And so now, and then you got Deuce McBride, who's an important part of the team. So now you like keep everybody involved in the whole thing. But are these guys okay? So who's playing the 20 minutes? Who's playing the 22 minutes? And I'm going to be interested to see how you guys navigate that. And like Dillingham, for instance, is Dillingham going to be a member of the rotation on night one? I would assume he is, right? You know?
Yeah, no, but this kind of like pushes him down to like last guy in the rotation, I think.
Yeah.
Because you don't have now Dante could maybe handle some point guard stuff. Like they need to like figure out how to handle point guard minutes that aren't Mike Conley. And like maybe a little bit of that is Ant, a little bit of that is Nickeil Alexander-Walker, a little bit of it is DiVincenzo. I thought Finch had a great quote when he was asked like, what are reasonable expectations for Rob Dillingham? And he said, for him to play well 1 every 3 nights. Like, like he said, that's what like is reasonable from a 19-year-old point guard, you know.
That's a great quote.
And so
that's a great quote.
And so I think he's gonna have and he talked to it. He did a great interview with Minpost, and anyone wants to listen. I don't know why you guys would really care about that. Your listeners would care about it, but I think he will shrink and expand, has the ability to shrink and expand Dillingham's role to fit what they need. And the reality of this situation is like, yeah, okay, Dillingham, you were a lottery pick, but you're coming into a team that went to the Western Conference Finals who has every intention on doing that again. So I think DiVincenzo actually helps them mitigate some of that risk, because it was looking like on draft night, it was like, all right, Mike Conley and Rob Dillingham, 37-year-old and 19-year-old, that's all they got at point guard, because Monte Morris is gone and Jordan McLaughlin is like, there's no other point guards on the roster. Now you're like, now I don't know. I think I like that element of it for DiVincenzo. But yeah, is he going to be cool coming off the bench?
I think he'll be cool coming off the bench if he gets his minutes, if he could get his shots up when he's in there. Like he's not he's the furthest thing from a selfish player, but like the one thing I could not help get, and he's still a ways away from his next contract, especially since even with the bump to 40% raise that you could get, like I'd be utterly shocked if he extended off of this number, because of the way salaries are. So like, I don't know if he's sort of like he is thinking about money yet, but like, no, he's unselfish. But he knows here's the thing. He knows what he could do. He knows what he could do. He knows how much he could help a good team. And, you know, like if there's 5 guys out there who are better than him, and he'll sit back and he'll root for them as hard as anyone. But I have a funny feeling you're going to want him out there closing games a lot more often than maybe some people think.
Yeah, I got to think about that one. And I mean, it is a fairly like positionally fluid group, like outside of Rudy. And I think Finch will do it, but it's going to be, I'm curious to see how many different positions they'll have DiVincenzo play, or Randall, or, like what is that all going to look like with how they're able to slide that around.
Randall's not playing 3, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Right. Well, the 5. I mean, I am interested about that part of it, of like, because again, I told you what I think about Naz Reid. Like, I
want to see him. I want to see him with Naz. I'd be curious to see him with Naz at 3. I'd be curious to see him with Naz at the 5. So I'd be curious to see both of those. Look, I'll be rooting for the Timberwolves from afar this year. I got nothing but love for Julius. Certainly got nothing but love for Dante, and got nothing but love for you. I appreciate you taking the time, man. This was fun.
Yeah, man. No, this is fun. We'll have to circle back and like do a check-in
mid-season check-in.
It's gonna be both. I mean, I know I'm definitely gonna be watching more Knicks games this year. Like, what am I gonna tune into today? Got to see my guy Cat.
I'll be curious because the Raptors became the de facto Knick fan, like everybody who had league pass like was turning on Raptors games after December 31st. I wonder how much Knicks fans are going to follow this Timberwolves team. I mean, they'll be on a lot because they're really good and it'll be easy to see them. They'll be first on my list for sure of like our non-Knicks games that I'm going to want to watch and pay attention.
It's going to be the inverse of that too, where like Wolves fans are definitely going to tune in because this is the only thing Karl's ever known. It's the only thing we've ever known Karl to be in. I mean, it's gonna. I am endlessly fascinated to see Karl in New York with the New York media. I mean, dude, you want to talk about soft? We are soft. Us in the Minnesota media, soft.
Well, let me just say this: for the reputation is what it is about the New York media. We had a gentleman who was on the beat for many years.
Whenever you introduce somebody as a gentleman, I know this is Joe.
He has since moved on to greener pastures being South Florida. He liked to stir the pot every now and then. Since he's been gone, though, I gotta tell you, there's not a whole lot of that. Everybody is incredibly cordial and like, yeah, I don't see that being a problem. What I will say is this: like, I don't know how it works there, but we have the best beat in the league in terms of like just the amount and how good they are. And if there's something burbling under the surface within the organization, like let's say Karl's not getting along with Tibbs or whatever, like it'll come out. Like they're not, no one's sitting on that. That's going to come out, and then it'll be interesting. Hopefully nothing like that happens. So we don't have to worry about anything.
I mean, it'll happen. I'm curious to see how they play through it happening. Like that's just life. That's any star player, right? Like you gotta navigate the relationship of it. But yeah, man, I don't know. To your listeners, enjoy Cat and like I said before, like a great dude, a really good dude, and a goofy but effective basketball player.
I hope people give him a real chance, and if it does start off a little, if it starts off good, then he'll be fine. If it does start off iffy, I hope people will have some patience. Dane Moore, please let folks at home know where they could find you and your exceptional content.
Yeah, Dane Moore NBA on Twitter. You can, and if you want to check out my show is predominantly Wolves centric, but if you do want to tap in and check in on Julius and Dante, I'm doing daily pods throughout the season at almost every day, just kind of covering this team on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, Dane Moore NBA podcast on YouTube or on wherever people get podcasts these days.
I said before we started recording, I'll say it now. You are one of the truly exceptional and inspiring independent content creators out there, which is fantastic to see. It's fantastic to say. And I wish the Knicks would take a page from your organization's book and maybe, give a little access every now and then to the little guy. But
that's a whole loaded thing out there in New York, man. No,
it's fine though.
We don't have as deep of a media contingent in Minnesota as New York.
I think if I was the only media person attempting to cover the Knicks, they still would not let me within 50 feet of that building. But that's neither here nor there. Dane Moore, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck this season.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.